Hello, everybody. We are here with Rebecca K.S. Ansari, the author of The In-Between, which was our February 2021 book. I was spending this afternoon refreshing my memory on it because it's been several months now since I read it. I was like, oh, that's why I chose this book. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And we're so excited to sit down and talk with Rebecca. So we always like to just start with having the author tell us in their own words what the book is about and then what inspired this amazing story.
All right. So the book, I always get a little flustered when I describe my books because I'm so afraid that I'm going to ruin something, because a lot of my books involve mysteries and secrets and things of that sort. So this book is about a brother and sister who are both dealing with their parents' divorce. Their father has left the family, and he and his sister, the main character is Cooper, he's 13, and his sister Jess is 10, and they are dealing with this in two very different ways. He is very hurt, angry, and withdrawn, and she is very hopeful and full of energy that it's all gonna be okay and that their family will be back together. And that is the background for the setting of this new girl who moves in across their back alley. And she just sits and stares at Cooper all the time. And she doesn't talk to him. She doesn't answer him. She just watches him, and it drives him insane. And then Jess brings him a bizarre situation where she has found online a train accident that happened 100 years ago. Where a child was a victim of the accident that was never identified. It was never, the person was never, no one came forward for this child. And the only identifying characteristic on the child is an emblem on their clothing. And Jess realizes that it's the exact same symbol that is on the neighbor's jacket. And it goes on from there, trying to figure out, wait a minute, how could that possibly be connected? It can't be connected. Can it be connected? It shouldn't be connected. Maybe it's connected. So
I think that is a perfect description up to, without revealing anything.
Right, there you go.
So many things that happen from that point.
Indeed.
Yeah, I have to say, I was kind of wishing we were having a full-on book club discussion today where we could dig into all of it.
Right.
But perhaps
I would have to take a show of hands of like, so who's read it? Who has it? So I know what I can say.
No, but that's perfect for keeping it spoiler free. So you mentioned, I think, in the magazine interview that we featured in the book, that the relationship between Cooper and Jess is inspired by your own relationship with your sibling.
Yes.
So yeah, how did you bring that to life? And
well, they always say, write what you know. I am blessed in that my own parents are still together to this day and may even be watching right now. So that aspect of their family relationship was not one that I took from my own life. But my brother and I, and our relationship, which is phenomenal now, was one of a big brother, little sister. And it was very easy for me to just kind of plug away at, I know I drove him insane at times. I intended to drive him insane at times. Like, that was the point, right? Is let's see what you do if I sit here and poke this particular part of you. And so I could easily craft Jess in kind of that same mold of, hey, big brother, what are you doing? What's going on? How are you doing? What can we, just, and it's just easy to fall into that relationship because it's one that I knew so very well back in the day. Yeah.
You also mentioned that they deal with their family situation in very different ways. And as I said, I was refreshing my memory on the book this morning, and it struck me again how big these emotions are that Cooper in particular, because you're more in Cooper's actual head and thoughts.
Right.
They seem like pitch perfect, but I feel like sometimes we want to pretend that kids don't have those feelings or shield them from those feelings, even when they're there.
Yeah.
Tell us about why you thought it was important to portray that and how you did.
Yeah. So I am really lucky as an author to have 4 sons in my home every day. I started writing many years, I think when my oldest was like 10, he's now 18. And so I have watched 4 young men go through that moment where you go from being like a nice little cute kiddo who wants to hug your mom as soon as you see her after school, to the kids that are like, I'm done with that. And they're still who they are. They're still at times going to want that hug, but at times not. And so I really like crafting characters that are right in that space of trying to figure out what is next after being, you know, a family member. Now I'm trying to figure out what I am out in that world there. So what was the exact question? I feel like I got sidetracked. Oh yeah, they're different relationships. I also had, I have a good friend who is personally going through divorce with her daughters. Mm-hmm. Very different reactions from the different age groups. So I had that to ask her questions and say, does this seem on track, you know? And she was saying that her own daughter kept texting with dad, and whereas the other one wants nothing to do with it. So those are real feeling, because they're real. I mean, I could take you over and say, there she is, you know? So that's part of that research aspect, as well as when I was this age, it felt like every one of my friends' parents were getting divorced. I don't know whether it was that much more common in the 80s and 90s, or if it just felt like it because it was all my friends' parents. But I very much remember those feelings of conflict and trying to figure out, what is this new family? How does this work? What do you mean I go over there to that house and then I come home to this house? And so that was something that was very much of an experience as a friend back in the day.
One of the, completely lost my words, sorry.
No worries.
The theme that we ended up going with for this box was Write It Down, which, as far as other boxes that we've done, was kind of like a deep cut for the plot of the book. It didn't, I've had a few people who haven't read the book yet say, like, what does that have to do with anything?
Right.
But this is barely a spoiler. It's in the first 20 pages or so. Cooper is lucky enough when he's about 11, I think, mm-hmm. to have a teacher named Mrs. Wishengrad, who gives him his own assignment in English class to find delicious words and to kind of just find a new way to express himself and to build up this vocabulary for who he is and what he's feeling, mm-hmm. Which was amazing. I think all of us should be so lucky to have a teacher like that. How did you decide to weave that part into the rest of this story?
Well, I wanted, and again, trying to get this non-spoilery answer here. I wanted there to be definitely that he was a journaler. I needed that writing down your story to be a through thread through many different people.
Right.
And I really, when I read, I relish in when an author uses a word that just hits it perfectly. And I actually keep a list in my phone of delicious words. And so I thought it was fun to have that maybe be an assignment for Cooper, because he didn't want to write at all. The teacher's like, write in your journal. And he's like, I don't think so. That sounds terrible. I don't like my life. Whereas for him specifically, she just wants him to kind of find things that are words that mean something close to an emotion he knows, but then kind of look into it deeper. Mm-hmm. And I just think that it's so fun, especially when I'm writing, that sometimes you'll put in a word and you're like, that's not quite it. That's not quite right. And so then you think and you noodle and you come back to it, or you check a thesaurus, or you don't, and try to figure out what's the word that is exactly right. Yeah. And so kind of a little bit of author nerd time came into creating that scene.
That's great. Yeah, and then the writing theme does carry on throughout the story as well, but like what I said, we don't want to spoil that. I'm just seeing somebody's comments here from Reed is saying, what about Gus? Because Gus is cool. So let's talk a little bit about Gus for a minute. Reed, did you have any particular question about Gus? If you do, you can pop it back in the chat because I'm looking at it now, or you can put it in the Q&A. But I loved Gus. We'll talk a little about writing the character of Gus.
Gus is, so part of the beginning of the whole novel was this train wreck and this unidentified kid. And the crazy thing is that is a real story that happened in England 100 years ago. And they still don't know who, it's actually two kids. They still don't know who they are or were. So I found that first and I thought, oh my gosh, I want to create an answer because there has to be an answer. This is crazy. And I started thinking about how would kids be lost? How would kids be forgotten? And that is where the whole idea of a distant parent and a broken family just naturally came right in. Mm-hmm. So I wanted Gus to have a similar path, that he also feels kind of cast out or forgotten. His parents have sent him to stay with grandma, and he is not even in his own state right now, and feels very left out as well. And that is really the beauty of his relationship with Cooper, is that they both can have that kind of heartbreak, that sore, mm-hmm. that they can find each other to help it's a salve for them both, that they are both able to have a connection and an understanding that they don't feel like anyone else really has. Cooper's old best friend has a great family, and he just doesn't feel like they can understand him at all anymore. Yeah. So Gus is his fit with Cooper is just so, the friendship is so easy because they have that together. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you sort of he's like a bit of a safe haven for him, because his old friends, not that anything like happened in particular with Cooper's old friend group, but it's like they know too much about him in some ways, and they don't know who he is right now at the same time. So yeah, Gus comes along right at the right time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Nazareth is asking, what led you to write young adult books, or middle grade books, as this one is?
Yeah. I really, kind of to what I was saying before, with that moment of becoming, kind of leaving the childhood aspects of life. You're starting that first step, but you're not really an adult yet, or even a teen yet. You're still in that space. And that is just in my own life where so much change and reflection and thinking happened. I've seen it in my own kids, and I just love addressing that time of life. But truth, when I started writing, I just wanted to write something my kids would love. I was like, how cool would it be if I wrote a book that my kids thought was awesome? That would be amazing, because I would read with them all the time, and some books they'd be like, meh, and other books I go, oh my gosh, you can't stop reading, one more chapter. And I thought, I want to write a one more chapter book. So that's kind of been my driving force.
Nice. This is your second book, is that right?
That's right.
So for anyone who may have gobbled this book up and wants more of your writing, can you also tell us a little bit about The Missing Piece of Charlie O'Reilly, your first book?
All right. Yes. So this is my first novel, Missing Piece of Charlie O'Reilly. And it similarly has a mystery. but it's somewhat the opposite in that Charlie O'Reilly's little brother has been missing for a year, but no one notices but him. His parents say, we have no idea what you're talking about. You're an only child. They send him to see a therapist. No one at school knows what he's talking about. But he had a little brother who just vanished a year ago. And his best friend, a neighbor who lives across the street named Anna, she believes him, but she doesn't remember him either. But she's willing to say, I'm in, let's figure this out. Huh. So that's the starting spot of Charlie O'Reilly.
I got chills thinking about that. I need to know more about this. It's been on my reading list since it came out. Okay. So the in-between, and again, we have to keep this somewhat spoiler-free, but there's multiple genres and multiple storylines going on in between. As a writer, how do you do that? How do you keep track of it? How do you, write multiple things at once? I've always, as a reader, loved a book that has two things going on that you're like, what is happening here? Like, these don't make sense together. And I've pulled some titles. So Long Walk to Water, it's two books in one that you're like, I don't understand why these are even in the same binding until like the last page. Highly recommend. And it's a super quick read. Nice. I also love, this is one of my favorite books of all time, is Holes, which has two storylines that, again, seem completely unconnected until it all comes together in this amazing mishmash of it's all perfect. So this has always been an inspiration to me. So same thing with this one. When you read by Rebecca K.S. Amazing. So I actually find it fun to write kind of two storylines, because if I get tired of one, I can kind of put it down for a second and be like, ugh, I need to go back to this backstory. And the same is true in Charlie O'Reilly. There are two very different storylines happening. And the tough part, of course, is then I write myself into these ridiculous corners of not knowing how to bring it all together. And you also then have who knows what at what time. And so if I was in a different room of my house, I would show you that I have the Post-it note wall. And once I get a certain ways through the story, I start writing one Post-it note across the top for like each chapter's main event. And then drop down Post-it notes of what does each person know in each of these scenes. And I realized that if I need to move this scene over here, all that knowledge is going to come with it, which then might make trouble down the line. So I have to have a visual map. I'm a very visual person. And so once I get myself completely in a pickle, that helps me sometimes kind of extract things and make sense of it all. Right.
Yeah. Well, with a story like this too, like you need to keep on top of that. My friends and I call it the murder board, where like
totally.
You have like the strings connecting everything. When you move things around, everything else has
Yes.
Mental and physical Tetris.
Yes, exactly.
Shanleigh, I can see we've got some questions popping up in the Q&A. Can I turn things over to you for a minute?
Yeah. Well, the first one is not really a question. It is a really beautiful comment, though, that I can tie into a question. And it's from, I believe it's pronounced Lisa. I apologize if that was incorrect. But they say that they're a type 1 mom, and they were really appreciative of the type 1 diabetes representation in the book and how it was incredibly accurate for them. And then we also have Kay asking, what gave you the idea for Jess to have diabetes? If you wouldn't mind answering.
So I think it's super important for there to be representation in books of every kid as much as we can, so that it isn't just this, every book is kind of the same cast of characters. There are some things I feel like I am prepared to write about, and other things I am not prepared to write, because it's not anything that I actually have experience with. This was an area that I felt like I could tackle responsibly for two reasons. One, before I was an author, I was actually an emergency room doctor. And so the medical aspect of knowledge to that certainly helped bring that and make it true. Also, one of my best friends has a kiddo with type 1 diabetes. And so he and I would send chapters back and forth with him as far as what are the tough nights like? What is it? What happens in this scenario? What happens in that scenario? And he was able to really help guide me through the realities of that particular life.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I didn't realize you were an emergency room.
Yeah.
Incredible. So yeah, lots of like firsthand knowledge on that as well.
Many stories, yes, indeed. Although it is interesting, my editor, I had one detail about the little papers that you put the blood on that goes in the little machine that gives you the number. In the ER, we apparently always do it wrong in that we do the paper, then we stick it in the machine, because that's the way I've always seen everyone do it. And my editor was like, don't you put the paper in first and then get the blood? And I'm like, if that's true, we've been doing it wrong the whole time. Or we have different machines, I don't know.
Did you call up your hospital, the one that you used to work at, and be like, guys, we're doing it wrong this whole time?
I did not, but maybe I should. Just be like, guys, I think you need to change the way we do this.
I'm trying to think too. I have someone close to me, he's also type 1, and but they've gotten like that set button lately, so I completely forget now which order they used to put.
Well, not only that, it'll show up on your phone. It just gives you the lead,
super handy. And now they look like a robot even more so it's pretty cool. We had a couple questions here too about what inspired you to sort of write the story and what. Yeah, let's start with that one. What inspired you to write it? Like, what was the first inkling?
So I was actually a little stymied by getting this book started. I had finished Charlie O'Reilly. I had poured my heart and soul into it. It was my first baby book, and it was like, I did it all. This is it. And then you finish it and it's published and there's, you know, rainbows and unicorns. And then you're supposed to write another book. And it's really disappointing in some ways. So then I sat down at a blank computer screen and thought, I don't know what I want to write. And I literally started with, I know I write mysterious and somewhat magical stories. So let's go find some mysteries. Let's find something that's unsolved or unique or different. And I just started hunting through online searches of weird events. And so many of them took me nowhere. They were not at all appropriate for the age group, or, you know, not interested in murder. And, but it was, this one came across my eyes and I thought, now that I could have some fun with. And it kind of took off from there.
And that was that the story that inspired the train, the Chester?
Charfield, yeah.
Charfield, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
so
right.
that was the spark that then got me going, because up until I found that, I just like, I spent everything I had on my first book. I don't know what to do now. So now that I'm writing my third book, I can take faith that you can do it again, girl. Just keep on getting in front of the keyboard and get to work.
That seems to be a running theory, where like the first book, obviously, like it percolates, it sits, no
one's watching.
Yeah, no, of course, no one's expecting something, and then when it happens, it's exciting and great, and then someone's like, okay, next, and you're like, I put all the info in there though. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It seems like, yeah, book 2 is always like almost more of a struggle, or maybe just a bit of a struggle than the first one.
Well, because now there's deadlines and people are wondering where you're at and how's it going. And that's a whole new experience than for the first one, for sure.
We also have a couple questions, if you don't mind, about what got you into writing to begin with. Like, what made you interested in becoming an author?
So I actually am a complete science nerd. I obviously went to medical school and became a doctor. I thought English class was not for me. My only unsatisfactory grade in middle school was my creative writing class. And my father my parents are both the most delightfully bookish academic people. They looked at that and said, okay, so let's get to work. And we had this Tuesday night assignment, and it was a creative writing, which I don't enjoy forced creativity. And so I didn't enjoy this assignment. But my father sat at the dining room table with me, and I would write out my assignment, and he would put a little dot next to a line that had a problem. And he wouldn't tell me what it was, and he wouldn't tell me how to fix it, but he'd just say, something's not right here. And then I had to figure out, with his help, if I just couldn't get it, have him kind of lead me there. And though I hated this, let's be clear, like when you're asking, why are you a writer? This story more made me go, this is terrible. But it taught me so much about writing and about how do you recognize your own edits? How do you find something that's not quite right in what you've written? And it made me such a better crafter of language and story. But it was not until I was already out of school, I was a mom, it was kind of the initiation of the blog era. I had two hilarious friends who were blogging amazingly entertaining stories of life with young children. And I thought, you know what? I think I have some good stories here. I have 4 small children crawling all over me, and I am and a full-time job and a business that my husband's starting. We've got good stuff here. And so I started writing on the blog and really enjoyed it, did it on whenever it seemed like there was a funny story to tell. And people kept coming to me and saying, you are really, this is good stuff. You should write. I'm like, I have no time for that. So thank you. But this is the little snippet that I can offer this in my life right now. But then the more I read with my kids and the more I enjoyed the writing of my own stories, when no one told me I had to, I was just doing it for fun. I started to really love it. And again, started thinking, what if I could make a really fun story that my kids would love? And at the same time, my husband's business took off, and we were able to just sit down and say, hey, if I wanted to do this, if this is the gig that I actually wanted to jump to, we could pull it off. And so I took a flying leap off that cliff, and here we are.
Here you are.
Here we are.
One last question, and then maybe I'll turn it back to you, Sally.
Sure.
It's going to be a kind of a combo question I'm mixing up here. But people are very curious about how you came up with the idea of the in-between and of Elena specifically.
Okay, give me a second.
Without spoiling about 70% of the book.
Right. Yes. This might be cagey of an answer, but if someone's asking this, they probably all understand the code. I think it's really important to recognize when we're stuck in life, where, let's say, it's actually amazing to me that this book came out in the middle of a pandemic, because I didn't know that. Lord knows this book was long wrapped and heading to the printer before we started this. But we've all found ourselves stuck in this moment. We can't go back from where we were. We want to. We desperately want that life back, but you can't roll it back. You can't change things that have already happened. And that's true for both Cooper and Jess. They don't want this life that they have, but you can't go backwards. At the same time, neither of them really know how to move forward. They're stuck. And they don't know how to get to the other side. And so they're stuck in the in-between. They are between an old life and the new life, and they don't know how to get to either. And so that I wanted to have an actual physical representation of that stuck place where you can't go back, but you can't move forward. Wow. I hope that is enough.
Also, how very apropos, I even wrote this down when I was going through the book again last night. Stay apart to stay alive. Without saying anything more than that, but I just read that and went, wow, that hits different.
it hits real different than when I wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a few books that in the last year have come out that we've included or talked about with the box, and that's happened more than once with Hollowpox with Jessica Townsend.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote a book about a virus that is sweeping through this town, written way beforehand.
Way beforehand.
Yeah, Echo Mountain by Lauren Volk was about, you know, the Dust Bowl and everyone having to, you know, pivot and having to leave their life behind. And it came out last April, I think, which was, you know, when we're like, maybe this will be 6 weeks.
Right.
Yeah, it's always so interesting to see how stories can like really take on a whole other context and meaning, and just
well, and also in fun, they dyed the Chicago River 2 days ago. It happened, and someone was saying that they were reading the chapter where Cooper talks about dyeing the river on the day that they went and saw the river green. So it's always fun to just see a little, well, that really is happening.
Just like that.
Yep.
It was so interesting to hear you say that you were a grown-up by the time you started really writing. We always love to ask if you have any advice for young writers. Yeah, do you have any advice for young writers?
You know, I think it's so common that we think that every writer has the same story. You know, I've always wanted to write. I've loved books forever. I didn't like books for many years of my life. I didn't want to read. I wanted to watch TV and hang out with my friends. Like, that's okay too. But I think just recognizing that the road, it's not always the same path to get to a place. I didn't think this is where I was going to be at this point in my life, but that's what happened. So it's okay to say, we'll see what tomorrow brings in a lot of these situations where if you told me I was going to quit medicine, I wouldn't have believed you. And yet that's the path this life took.
Yeah. And keep a good stock of Post-it notes, I think, was probably
big stock.
Also
big stock. Yeah.
Now, are these all different colored Post-it notes? Is there like a code to them?
I have not coded them as of yet, but that's more of laziness in my shopping habits, because that probably would be a really good idea.
Okay.
My highlighters mean different things for sure.
Okay, that's, yeah. So you mentioned that you are now working on book 3, is that right?
Yes.
Is there anything you can tell us about that?
So book 3 is set in 1909 at a inn in Maine. And our main character is Liza. She is 13, and she has basically lived her entire life at the inn. It's kind of a secluded location, always with her father by her side, always with him protecting her. She has no idea. At first, she didn't realize she even had a mother, but as she grew older, she realized it appears one would be necessary in the creation of a human being. And so she knows she must have one, but there is no information ever given. Her father refuses to even bring up the subject. And when she's 13, she's now at a point where she can go by herself into the nearby town. And she starts asking questions about her mother. And there are many secrets that she has to try to unwind when it comes to her mother's disappearance.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Oh, and her cousin and aunt arrive at the inn, and they have a lot of information and aren't necessarily following the family code of silence. So the cousin becomes kind of her partner in crime.
Okay. That sounds great. Do we know when we could potentially do a pre-order for this, or is this?
Goodness no. It is this has not been the most prolific writing year. So having children, it's homeschooling has been not great for my productivity, but I'm working on it now.
So you mentioned earlier that the story or the mystery that sparks everything in the in-between is inspired by real life events. When you were doing your research for this, were there any other mysteries that could have been that mystery instead that jumped out to you?
So for those who have read it, there are other events historic events that are mentioned. Those are also real. So yes, there was multiple incidents that I found and then riffed off of for each of the events that they encounter. It had to have a very specific flavor to it. So I wanted to be true to the history of those events, because I think it's fun after you read a book to be like, what? That's real? And then Google it and check it out and read the information about it. So there's 3 of those that are actually already in there. But in order to fit the story and fit the kind of the criteria of what they had to be, there were other historic things that I looked up that I was like, nah, that one doesn't quite give me what I need.
Okay. Well, I think you chose the right one. It was,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Do you have any middle grade books that you, or 2-part question, what were your favorite books, if any, that you either read yourself or your bookish parents read to you as a kid? And are there any upcoming middle grade books that you are excited about, or ones that you've recently read?
I pulled some that I've recently read that I love. As far as like the books I loved when I was a kid, my mom and I read, this is going to sound hilarious, but we read The Secret Garden, and she read out loud with me Jane Eyre. And it was like these wonderful memories of me and mom reading these books, which I look back on now and it kind of makes me laugh. But they're great books. So you guys aren't going to be surprised by this one since it was last month's choice, but Amari, super fun, super great book for those who haven't had it yet. It's just a fun romp and mystery and magic and adventure, and I just loved it. This book is so good. It's ridiculous. Sweep by Jonathan Augustiere. It is a story about a girl and her monster. And she is a chimney sweep in England back in the 1800s, if I'm remembering correctly. And she befriends a coal monster. And it is a beautiful story that has history aspects that are real, but not hitting you over the head with it. It's more that it sets this amazing scene. And their friendship and the friendship she ends up having with other sweeps and kids that don't have families is just so good. And if you like another mystery and kind of history weave together, The Parker Inheritance by Marian Johnson, such a fun it's a fun book. And it also is awesome with representation, and it tackles a history of a racist event in a way that is not responsible. It lets you kind of access a better understanding of how racism in the United States, the through lines that it's not the big events, it's the little things, and it's the little comments and the things of that sort that it just helps you understand. It certainly helps me better as a person that's not my experience, get it in a way, but it's also a great story and a good mystery.
Yes. Just found out yesterday that Marian Johnson has another book coming out fall, I think, and I'm very, very excited about that.
It's great.
Those are all such great picks. Thank you for sharing those with us.
We have Gianni wanting someone to answer her questions, so I feel like we need to
bring them up in just a second.
Great. Awesome.
Go for it, Shanleigh.
Yanni has asked a lot of questions, mostly about the cover, actually. And
oh yeah.
You could maybe talk a bit about how the cover came to be, the different elements that are sort of a part of it all, if you can say any of that without spoiling some things. Thank you, Jan.
Absolutely. Okay, so when mine is blue because you guys have the super cool red OwlCrate special, or purple. So this aspect at the top, so the way this happened is the artist, basically, she does lots of work like this. Her name is Julia Iredale. And lots of her work is this kind of silhouettes with all sorts of other details woven into it. So I loved this idea when they said, hey, would this artist work for you? And I said, yes, absolutely. So she then made, obviously here, the top part is the girl on her swing, which is where Alana always sits, next to her kind of redone, built up home. The train track runs through the middle here. You also have a building with smoke coming out of it, which you will, for those who have read it, know that there is a fire that happens in the story. We also have the bridge with two people on it. There is, this is a space where Gus and Cooper go to be alone, but together. And so the bridge also ends up being an important part of the story. Mm-hmm. And I love covers where you understand it better once you read it, where you go back and you're like, oh, look, there's that thing that I didn't realize. And if you look on the back, I don't know how well you can see, it's very faded. It's a bigger image of Alana on her swing.
Oh, I didn't even notice that back there because.
Yeah. So I don't know, did that answer the questions? That were,
so yeah, they were bringing up a lot of like the car on the cover and the train tracks. So I hope that answers your question, Leanne. Thank you for asking them. Yeah. And then we also do, if I can just continue to stay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we're coming up on our time here, so we'll do a rapid fire. Any remaining questions that we can ask that don't spoil things, go for it.
Well, we've got a lot of people asking if there's going to be a book 2 to the In-Between.
At the moment, there is no planned sequel for this book. Now, that doesn't mean that my brain might not figure out some way to do that. But I tend to write to a kind of a closure. And so I don't know quite what thread at this point I would pull on to start again.
Okay, fair enough. We also have, who's your favorite character in the book? Always a spoiler.
I love Gus so much. He's just a solid friend who is there in all the ways Cooper needs. And he's funny, he's self-deprecating, he doesn't take anything, you know, the kids aren't always nice, but he just rolls with the punches. And he's kind of that friend everyone needs, you know?
And a fellow Calvin and Hobbes lover, which I appreciated.
How can you not appreciate that?
Right? Little Far Side, little Calvin and Hobbes, you know.
Oh, was it? Oh, anyways, yes, I have them both next to my.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We also have Ashlyn and someone on our Facebook Live right now also wondering about any authors that inspired you to begin writing. You did mention that you read classics with your mother, but if there are other specific authors that come to mind.
Well, I don't think anyone can say that J.K. Rowling hasn't moved them in this space. The idea that you would take something that's, you know, she did this amazing thing of starting with an 11-year-old and finishing with an 18-year-old and writing through those age changes, which no one had done. In the past, it was you either write for this age group or you write for this age group, and you don't really take them through. And then Rick Riordan kind of followed that same pattern. So I love the way that she was able to take a bigger story and put it through the whole series, but then each individual book has its own arc. And it's complete. Like I was saying, you know, my books are complete, but she manages to have this overarching thing that is, it's just inspiring. And my kids could not, I've read the series now, I can't even tell you how many times out loud with each of my 4 kids, then again with one, and I'd read it all myself. So just her ability to make a story that you just love and that it's fun. So many kids' books are intense and sad, and you know, people are like, your book is about divorce. I'm like, well, divorce is in there, but it's actually like a really cool mystery, and they like solve stuff. So I really love that lighter aspect of kids writing. So it seems completely lame to say J.K. Rowling, and yet it's true.
You can't help where inspiration strikes, right?
Right.
What has inspired, what has made this genre so interesting, and what has made middle grade as big as it is currently. Yeah, credit where credit is due. Yeah,
and Lewis Sacker's with Holes. I mean, it's
of course,
it's a masterpiece in what the exact type of story I love to try to craft.
Well, I have one more question. I think will probably be our last one. Thank you so much to everyone who wrote in their questions. Unfortunately,
thank you guys so much for being here.
But this one is a really good one, I think, to end off on, and it's from Courtney, who says, why did you want to write about mysteries in your books, and why is it important to have the mysteries in there?
Great. As a reader, I love any book where by the time I'm even done with chapter 1, I'm like, well, now I need to find out the answer to that. There's this draw, there's a need to continue to read so that you can answer whatever question has been set up. And I know that there are books that do not do that, that are just more of a story. Like what I'm reading right now is an adult novel, won a bunch of prizes, but it's really just kind of like this person's life. Mm-hmm. And I'm struggling. It's just, I really love a book that snags you with a question, and then you have to read to find out what the answer is. And so to me, if that's what interests me as a reader, then I feel like I owe it to people to try to have that same excitement or mystery in what I ask them to spend time on if they're going to read my book.
That's fair. And I also have to say, I've really loved the experience of reading this particular mystery, because you give little hints and answers throughout, but never one solid, like almost parlor room scene moment, right? Like very slowly revealed and unraveled. And it's
you probably won't be surprised to know one of my favorite movies is The Sixth Sense. Also a bit of an inspiration. And for those of you who do not know the movie, when you are old enough, if you're not already, highly recommend.
Yes. Yeah, going back through it today, I was like, oh, there's a little, like, now that I know what happened, this makes more sense, and this makes more sense, and this makes more sense. So well done with that.
Those Post-it notes really came in handy.
Yeah, that is exactly right.
Well, I think that was the perfect question to end on. Rebecca, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. This was
asking me. It's so great.
Anyone watching, if you have not already read The In-Between, we have more copies available. If you would like this edition, you can also get it at any bookstore or from your library. But we cannot recommend this one enough. It was such just a thrilling, amazing middle grade read, and we're very happy to include it in the box. And we will leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and we will see you again next month.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.